Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to cover a few situations and questions arising from my last video on the release of the Operation Yellowhammer file, or at least part of it. And it basically covers people asking about what is the difference between Kingfisher, Yellowhammer and Black Swan, and also the prospect of Boris Johnson being suspended from Parliament. This is according to Dominic Grieve. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So, the Yellowhammer file that was released, of course, was not the full file. We know that because it was released via a leak some time ago, and that was much more detailed. But what was released a couple of days ago contained the same things, but much less of it. The other thing about Michael Gove, he'd always claimed that this is a worst case scenario. We knew that wasn't the case because not only did the leaked report say base scenario, but civil servants who were asked about it said, yeah, this is what we're expecting to happen. But of course, Michael Gove had said it was worst case scenario, and then Parliament forced them to release it. So he had to change the title to worst case scenario. However, there was a copy issued before that that still said base scenario. So they didn't even cover themselves up very well. Now, someone was asking me if this was a felony, I'm guessing American. Now, what I would say on this is Parliament voted, they conducted a humble address. And what they asked for were two things: the no-deal Brexit planning and all the documents pertaining to the reasons for prorogation. What the government handed over was a small part of the no-deal planning and nothing on the reasons for prorogation. So if Parliament was sitting right now, what they would definitely have done yesterday is held the government in contempt of Parliament and forced them to hand over the full documents. Theresa May fell foul of that a couple of times. Now, Theresa May's argument was always, as the current government is trying to do as well, these documents, it's sensitive, national security, all the rest of it. We can't just release it to the public. Now, when Theresa May was doing this and trying to refuse to hand them over to Parliament, Michael Heseltine, who was a government minister in the 80s, pointed out that the same scenario occurred under Margaret Thatcher's government. And what she did about it, she basically announced the results of an investigation, and it was related to the Falklands War. And the opposition weren't convinced that the government were telling the truth. So what Margaret Thatcher did is said, OK, what we'll do is we'll get senior members of all the opposition parties to come and have a look at it. And then they can, trusted members obviously, and then they can feed back to the rest of the MPs to verify that what the government said was true. And that's what happened, and it was all fine. So both Theresa May and Boris Johnson could have done that. If they're worried about national security, they could have said, right, trusted members of the different opposition parties, you come and have a look at the files for yourself and verify that what we have been saying is the truth. However, in this particular case, what they would feed back to their parties is, no, they're lying. So obviously they were never going to do that. So yeah, they don't get to refuse to release them because of national security issues. I mean, you can try and claim that about any government document you like, but in actual fact, everyone we have a right to know that the government are telling the truth about it, and Parliament are our representatives. And if they don't want it getting out to the public, get MPs, trusted MPs, to have a look at it. As simple as that. Now, the reasons they also gave for not releasing the prorogation documents, which included electronic documents as messages as well as paper ones, they claimed it would be illegal. Now that's absolute rubbish, I have to say, because this occurred some years ago, the college I teach at. So a parent wanted to see all the documentation on their child. So we had to do that. I'll tell you, it's a pain in the ass. So we had to, and that was everything. It wasn't just, the forms we'd filled in or anything like that. That was every single email that mentioned them. A full trawl had to be done on everything with this kid's name on it. And we had to hand that over. So what they're basically trying to say to us is that somehow the government, which is in charge of the future direction of the entire United Kingdom, is somehow legally less accountable than classroom teachers. I don't really think that's true. I don't believe that is true in the slightest. So that's the prorogation documents out of the way. So the next one is people were asking, so what's this about Kingfisher, Yellowhammer and Black Swan? So Yellowhammer is the base scenario. Despite what the government are still trying to say about it, it is the actual scenario that is expected in the event of a no-deal Brexit and immediately in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And as I say, if you want to see more details than was released by the government, look up the Times' leaked version, because, you know, Whitehall leaked it to the Times. They initially ran it with the juicier bits in it, and then they published the full document. You'll still be able to find that if you want to read of it yourself, and it contains a great deal more detail. So what about the other two, Kingfisher and Black Swan? So Black Swan is the real extreme worst case scenario. We don't know the details because the government haven't handed that over. What we do know from little snippets is it includes things like rationing of food, energy and fuel, and also the imposition of martial law. Now, I'm going to agree, if they release the planning for that, I'm going to say, yeah, that is a worst case scenario. I accept that. In fact, if that comes to pass, and you maybe think to yourself, well, if that's the real worst case scenario, I mean, that's probably pretty unlikely, isn't it? You would hope so. You would hope so. And I'm sure if we had a competent government that was facing the facts and really genuinely preparing for no deal, we should be able to avert that. Do you think we have a government that faces up to reality and is genuinely getting ready for no deal? Bearing in mind, as I said in the video yesterday, that the Operation Yellowhammer features that they released on Wednesday had exactly the same information with the same figures as the report that was leaked a month ago. That basically means no progress has been made because it's the same, just in less detail. But all the facts agree exactly, including the specific range of percentages of lorries that won't be able to get through French customs. So if they've made no progress in a month, they're not making progress. That's obvious. And they didn't even have to bother with Parliament over that period of time because, you know, Parliament had risen for summer. They've only been back to Parliament for a week. So then there's Kingfisher. So Kingfisher, which the government are quite happy to talk about, just not release the details of, is their harebrained scheme to throw money that we don't have at UK businesses that in a no-deal Brexit will suddenly become massively uncompetitive. And the reason for this is because the government intends to reduce import tariffs on virtually, or on the majority of things, to zero. That suddenly undercuts every British business in this country trading in those same things. And going back to the Yellowhammer video I did yesterday, one thing I did forget to mention, people have pointed out, is that one of the things in the original report, which presumably was part of the redacted thing, is with that effect, with the effect on fuel coming into the country having zero tariffs, that means there's no case for us to be able to refine it in this country. So that's 2 refineries that are going to go to the wall with the loss of another 2,000 jobs. So Dominic Grieve, he has said that Johnson could find himself expelled from the Commons. So, as I say, you know, if Parliament was still sitting, he would have been found in contempt of Parliament by now. And he would have had to hand over everything. In fact, it wouldn't have gone to him. The civil service would have had to hand it over. And that's another interesting point. Yesterday, the Civil Servants Union has been warning their members to be very, very careful because the government is essentially asking them to do things that are illegal. And their union is warning them that if they comply with that, they can be prosecuted later on. Don't expect any sympathy from a future government. And this obviously puts them in a very tricky position because we already know that if you defy the mighty Dominic Cummings in Whitehall, you are instantly sacked by someone who doesn't have the authority to do this and frog marched out of Downing Street, escorted by an armed police officer who you would hope will not do that again because Dominic Cummings didn't have the authority to order the police to do anything. But nonetheless, he's getting away with sacking them. So it's like some civil servants will literally face a choice between getting sacked or being prosecuted and then being sacked if convicted. So it's a really terrible situation. And it's no wonder that Whitehall are leaking lots of information to educate everyone about what's really going on, because they're in an impossible situation at the moment. So in terms of suspension, how can this be done? So I suppose there's a few ways in which an MP can be suspended from Parliament. One of them is Standing Order 44, which states, whenever a member shall have been named by the Speaker or by the Chair, immediately after the commission of the offence or disregarding the authority of the Chair, it won't be either of those two, or it could be this, of persistently and willfully obstructing the business of the House by abusing the rules of the House or otherwise, then if the offence has been committed by such member in the House, the Speaker shall forthwith put the question on a motion being made that such member be suspended from the service of the House. In other words, Parliament would then vote on whether Boris Johnson should be suspended. I'm going to guess they'll probably say yes. Although, I'm not sure what good it would do, because he hasn't wanted to face Parliament. In fact, by the time Parliament's sitting again, assuming the prorogation does last the full 5 weeks, because we don't know any different at the moment, then by the time they come back for the Queen's speech, Boris Johnson will have been Prime Minister for 12 weeks, but he'll have only been in Parliament for one of those weeks. But the other way in which they can be suspended, which I suppose is more likely, it says, where a member is found to have broken the code of conduct or committed a contempt, the Committee on Standards may recommend a period of suspension, which leads to a motion in the House. For more information, look at the briefing on disciplinary and penal powers of the House of Commons. So, I think it's usually about 5 days. But like I said, I don't know what good that does anyone to suspend him. What they really need to do is make sure he's going to obey the law on the 19th of October by signing that letter. And if not, then obviously make sure he's charged with a criminal offence, but ultimately replace him. So that's what Parliament needs to do now. Instead of getting tied up with their party conferences, they need to be seriously deciding who they're going to get behind, and everyone needs to be flexible on that. But so those are some of the issues arising from the various questions I had on it. Hopefully that was satisfied a few of you. Hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.